To begin with, I'm going to try and give all of us a crash course in economics so we all know what we're talking about. Economics is simply about decision-making in daily lives. You and I decide every day what products to buy and consume. Businesses decide how to produce that product and at what rate to sell. The government decides where does it get money to build the kind of infrastructure, improve the taxis that Luis is talking about, and to protect us against climate change that Dion spoke about. So it's simply about making choices and the impacts that these choices have on society. Economics is a social science, and it has all the characteristics of physical science. The good thing is it's interrelated with a number of fields. It's about business, it's about history, it's about law, it's about accounting. And it's also about science. Science is going to tell us what are the options, what are the technologies that we can possibly use. And economics and economists like me are going to tell you what is going to be the impact of those options or those technologies on you. So it fits beautifully in a scientific world. And if you ask me, I really believe that economics can help us explain everything that we see in reality. So the point is, the question, can a science-based organization like the WWF South Africa afford to ignore economics? Well, to me, actually, the answer is very simple, and it lies in all the things that we do. But what I am going to try and do is to take you through examples of our work and tell you the relevance of economics. Let's start with rhino conservation. Now, law enforcement is a necessary but not a sufficient condition for rhino conservation. This doesn't mean that we don't need law enforcement. It's important because it's crucial to protect rhinos while they are still alive. But that's not all. Economics can actually help us provide those sufficient conditions. And economic principles can actually give us insights in how to protect rhinos. If we make live rhinos more valuable than dead ones, we have a case. And that's simple economics. It's about trade-offs, live versus dead. It's about the supply of rhino horn vis-a-vis the demand for rhino horns. So where do we invest our resources when we conserve rhinos? On the supply side or demand side? Where are we going to get the maximum benefits for the resources? It's also about the benefits that we get from rhinos as a resource and the costs that we pay for that. Somebody has to bear the benefits and somebody has to pay the costs. Answering these questions through economics can be crucial in helping us protect rhinos. But let's make it a little more simple and more layman. We need to protect rhinos, so we need to stop poaching. Now, why does poaching happen? It simply happens because the returns from poaching are more than costs, or the returns from poaching are more than the returns from the alternative activities, such as tourism, associated with rhinos. So if we influence these returns and costs, we can protect our rhinos. If we can reduce the incentives associated with poaching, we can protect our rhinos. It's all about risk, reward, and incentives of poaching. And these are nothing but economic factors at play. The next example, ecosystems. Economics can help us explain why our ecosystems are being degraded. Ecosystems are not being destroyed because of will or stupidity. They are being destroyed because market signals make it profitable for people to destroy ecosystems. It's because people who destroy these ecosystems don't have to pay the costs of destruction. But the good thing is, economics can also help us find answers. We need to find how we treat ecosystems. Is it an externality of production, which means we perhaps use polluter pays principle to tackle ecosystems, to conserve them? Or do we consider it as a factor of production? It's a raw material or an input into economic activity, which means we will perhaps make investments to conserve our ecosystems. So conservation actually depends on the value you and I attach to our ecosystems. Is it a raw material, or is it just about aesthetic value and recreation? How do we value these benefits? And how are we distributing these benefits? Some of these questions can be answered through economics. And economics can also help us identify the kind of measures that we need to conserve our ecosystems. What are the kind of incentives that we need, and who do we give these incentives to? Who pays the penalty? How much penalty? So it basically depends on how we define the problem associated with conservation of ecosystems. And economics can precisely help us do that. The final thing, low carbon development. I mean, quite honestly, I wasn't going to include this in my presentation, or WWF for that matter would not be taking up this challenge if the economics of low carbon technologies worked favorably with fossil fuel technologies. So I can simply say I rest my case. But if there are those of you who still believe that it is about science, it's about the 4 degrees prediction of temperature increases, you need to stop and think. Why is it that until the Stern report, climate change was an environmental issue? But after the Stern report, it became a mainstream issue. More countries found the will and the power to take it up. It was because economics made it happen. Nicholas Stern picked up climate change and turned it from an environmental and moral issue into an economic one. We as people and governments find it easier to cope with economic issues than moral ones. What is moral from me differs from what is moral for you and from a third person. So, to conclude, WWF is about fabulous causes. But we can't expect people to support us just because these are fabulous causes or just because there are moral imperatives. It's like somebody said after Dion's presentation, you have to make it relevant to stakeholders. We have to make it relevant to our stakeholders. And we can do that if we make them see sense in the problem. And economics can play a huge role in that. It can tell them that there is an economic answer to the problem, so they need to tackle it. Finally, the causes that we at WWF represent are profoundly economic. And we need to remind stakeholders and stakeholders to the planet about these causes again and again. And for that, we simply cannot ignore the use of economics. Thank you.